Good morning. My name is Benita Gonzales. I am the Director of Support for Students with Exceptionalities for the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Today I'll be presenting a video that we created on October 10th, 2016 during our Teacher In service. The course was Station-Based Inclusion Instruction with Catholic Identity. We were locating ways on how to add Catholic identity within a station, within our different various grade levels. And also the inclusion piece was adding accommodations. I gave each grade level a scenario where a student required certain accommodations, and I also gave them a scenario where they were needing to implement behavioral interventions into their classroom and also into the station. The first station we'll be viewing is a pre-K 4 class. The two individuals in the video created a math station, and within that math station they implemented the story of creation. In that station, in that math station, they accommodated for tactile and auditory learners. And one of the behavioral interventions that I gave them was emotional outburst, what they would do for emotional outbursts within that station. So let's listen in and see what they implemented within their station.
Well, this is a math station dealing with creation, and it's a little flip booklet, and as you can see, it's just day 1 through 7, and under each little flap they have to draw or place stickers or coordinating with the number. Okay. So just for instance, day 4 was, or let's do day 5. Day 5 was beast of the air and the sea, and so there's 2 birds and 3 fish.
Well, they can either use, for differentiation, they can use stickers, they can draw, they can use manipulatives, they can use any number of resources that you would have in front of them so that they would be able to choose whatever they would like to use. And then you're reiterating all the numbers as they draw or put them on. Let there be light, there's just 1. On number 2, there are 2 things that they draw or glue on. On number 3, there are 3 items that they glue or put on. And so then you're counting with them as they're going over each number.
So then we had a little person who is very tactile learner and an auditory learner. So of course we would want to use some tactile manipulatives. So one thing we thought of, and for this little guy, we'd probably do it for all of them, but for this little person in particular, maybe foil for light. For the birds, yarn, blue yarn, to glue on to make the birds. So just using some tactile things. You could even do this in sandpaper if you wanted to get.
The numbers would be in sandpaper so they could trace.
And then as we're doing the different flaps, we have a precious little song here. For each stanza deals with each day, so we could sing. What kind of sounds do birds make? What would it sound like if all of a sudden there's all these animals all of a sudden in one place? What would that sound like?
Make the sounds of each animal.
Mm-hmm. And then this little person, one little person is prone to emotional outbursts, and so the scenario that I thought was, okay, he's drawing his tree and he doesn't like the way it looks, so it's like, you know, and what are you doing? I don't like the way that it looks. It doesn't look right. And so then we would step back. I'd say, okay, well let's step back here. We have a safe corner in our room. Would you like why don't we just go sit in the safe corner and we can talk about it. We would talk about how you feel about your tree. I think it looks great, but you didn't like it, so now it really doesn't look good because you're all over it. So let's go talk about it and see what we could do. And so we'd go to the safe corner. I'd probably put a timer on. I'd say, okay, we're going to set this timer here for 2 minutes, and we're going to be here for a little bit. You can hold Jesus, the Jesus doll or whatever, is in the safe corner. And when the timer goes off, let's go back and see what we can do about this tree, how we can make it beautiful. So it's basically just give them time to step away from the situation, think about it, talk about how he feels, she feels, why they scribbled, and what we can do to make it better.
If not in a safe place, maybe go back to centers and have him do, maybe he just needs some more movement, so he would go to all the other centers in the room and interact and totally get away from this. And then it might take him 2 or 3 days to finish this instead of 1, like the other children. So just totally get that person away, talk to them, get them moving around in the mind away. When he or she is ready, they come back. Then, of course, you're documenting everything to talk to the parents later.
So a couple of key components I heard from her, from their stations. Wonderful job, guys. We would do it for all.
Yeah.
Did you hear that? We would do it for all. And that's one thing I'm always teaching teachers, that you don't have to just do it for that one child. You can do it for all. The safe corner can be for everyone. Now this next station is a kindergarten station. The individuals in the video created a touch center, and their accommodations for their student was the font size, and they also had tactile learners. For the behavior intervention, they had student was upset when others are praised. So they were adding in those interventions. Now, the Catholic identity piece was the 5 senses are gifts from God. So they were naming the 5 senses within their station, and they were relating it to how they were gifts from God. So let's listen in on them as well.
So we're doing a center on, our centers are on the 5 senses, and we created one for touch. And basically we would have different objects with different tactile attributes, and the children would classify them. We thought this would be a kind of a good center in terms of classification and understanding that an object could be classified under more than one thing. So we thought that would even bring in kind of a higher level thinking aspect to it as well. We were given we had a student who needed an accommodation with regard to font size, and that they were a tactile learner. So this lesson in and of itself, or this center in and of itself, would lend itself well to a child who's tactile, because they're touching all of these things. We would take it one step further. We thought we could even make these words, make sure they're large enough, but we would actually make the words themselves represent themselves. So the smooth word would be smooth, the bumpy word would be bumpy, and so that would help the child, the tactile learner. But getting back to what you said, Benita, is that this is good for all of the kids, and the intervention we had behaviorally, this child would get upset when others were praised. And so look at this, I get a chance to get on my love and logic soapbox here a little bit.
That's why I put it that way.
There you go, perfect. But we talk a lot at our school about getting sad, not mad, right? And I think a lot of what we're talking about here is both preventative maintenance, right? Proactive things that you set up in a classroom versus the reactive. We want to be we want to limit that reaction as much as possible by making sure this child is placed in the right group, by making sure you're praising that child in genuine ways. I think one of the problems we run in with praise, even with our little kids, is they understand when praise isn't genuine. So we need to make sure we genuinely praise that child. Big fan here also of the growth mindset, so we're going to praise efforts as much as, if not more so, than final outcomes. We notice things a lot at school. Boy, I noticed you were trying so hard to get those feathers into 2 different places. I noticed that. And kids respond to that well. But if it does get to a point where this child, you have to react, right, and intervene in some way. Like I said, we talk about being sad as opposed to angry, reminding the child about what we believe in as our kindergarten classroom. We believe that we say things that lift people up rather than cut them down. So maybe we would, we do the uh-oh song in Love and Logic. Uh-oh. Our voice goes high and we say, uh-oh. And that kind of perks a child up to say, uh-oh. Uh-oh themselves, right? And maybe a reminder to that child, how is it that we treat each other in this classroom? Do we lift them up, right? That child might need some of that safe space that you talked about. We call it recovery time. That's what we talk about it. We call it recovery time among staff, Teachers have their own words for it. I think some of the teachers call it Bora Bora at our school. They can go to Bora Bora and relax for a little while, right? But the idea is that child will go there for as long as they need. And you may say to that child, when you feel like the words that come out of your mouth are going to be happy words that make others feel good, feel free to come back, right? And so that's how I think we would handle that intervention at our school.
Beautiful, beautiful job, guys.
Wonderful. One thing, I know they were discussing making the font larger. What would make a font larger other than you yourself doing it? Assistive technology, or even something as simple as, somebody said, a magnifying glass. This next station is a first grade station. The individuals in the video put together a station on a vocabulary scramble station. Their accommodations for their learner were they had learners with visual learning, breakdown of steps, and also their behavior interventions were they had some students that were impulsive. The Catholic identity piece is the Good Samaritan. Jesus Christ taught the great commandment, love of God and love of neighbor. So let's listen in to see.
Ours is super simple, and you can use this with any kind of activity. So we're focusing on the Good Samaritan. So we have a word list, so that way, some of the words that are kind of harder to spell for them at this point, the letter combinations. So we made a word bank that we would post somewhere in the room. And then we're focusing on the vocabulary from the day's lesson. So what they have to do is go find a card, and they're hidden around the room. So they have to go find a card, any card. I guess they're broken into groups. They go find a card with all of the vocabulary words scrambled up on there. And then they have to go pick one card, bring it back to their group, and then they have to unscramble the word and write the correct vocabulary. So if they need that extra assistance with how to spell the word, then the word bank is up somewhere posted. And then they have to unscramble the vocabulary word and write it underneath. And then the next step would be that we would have like a Good Samaritan poster on the wall, and then they would have to go post it on the wall, and then we go check for understanding, and then we would go lift the flap and see if they, if it's the correct word underneath, and then we could talk about the word some more.
Our accommodations where our student needs steps broken down, and they are a visual learner. So in order to break the steps down, we would just do one at a time. The first step would be to go find the card, and then everybody go back to your station. And then the next step would be look at the word bank. So we would just break down the steps, but only give one at a time. When that step's completed, we would go to the next step. And once again, that's the whole class, not just that student. Everybody's following those same steps. And then for the visual learner, it's already fairly visual because we're using colored paper, and we'll put them on a poster, and it's a flap, so it's more interactive. Our behavior issue is acts impulsively without apparent self-control, which happens a lot in first grade. A lot of the students act that way. Number one would be several of these on here ideas were just teacher proximity, staying close to the group with reminders of tapping on the shoulder, or just staying close and keeping them on task. One would be to also have the student repeat the directions that they're supposed to be doing, just so they remind you and themselves, we've agreed that these are the steps you should be doing. And then the last one would be natural consequences. If you're not listening to the directions, it may be incorrect, or you won't be able to participate because you didn't hear the directions. So those would be our behavior issue.
Wonderful. I like how you had him walk around. As teachers, you may know this already. The brain loves three things. The brain loves movement, music, art. Those three things. On this final station, it's a fourth grade station. The individuals in the video put together a 10 Commandments sorting. The accommodation for the students will provide extra time and reduce stimuli for noise. The behavior intervention was sexually related comments and how a teacher would intervene for those. The Catholic identity piece is the sacrament of reconciliation. Let's listen in.
Okay, so we had a religion lesson that we kind of incorporated reading and writing into. And the objective was for the students to review what it means to examine their conscience to prepare for reconciliation, and how that kind of relates to the Ten Commandments. So we have a Ten Commandments sort, and we wrote out all of the directions step by step for those kids that need visual, directions to help them work through it. But at the station, there's little, cards that have each of the Ten Commandments written on it for them to have in front of them, and then we cut apart some different scenarios or sins that may be quite specific to fourth graders, something that they can kind of relate to, things that are going on socially or in their life at that time. And they would work together to go through the sin and decide, which commandment, does this go with? And then after that, they would choose maybe one of the areas that kind of interests them. Maybe it's something that they're currently struggling with. And they would write a little bit about how they're dealing with it as a way to kind of reflect and examine their conscience.
And so we have a student who needs extra time and a reduced stimuli of noise. So we talked about how it really depends on the reason why they need the reduced stimuli for noise. So we have various scenarios because we don't know the child at this point, but one, they could collaborate together, do the collaboration part, but when it comes down to the independent time, they could have noise canceling headphones or move to a different place in the room so that they are not as distracted by the noise. If it is an anxiety thing, they might be able to work with only one partner or work by themselves, depending on the level of anxiety. But the collaboration is a key piece to the station, so we can accommodate in a way of making it, instead of 4 people in the group, there could be just one other partner that they communicate with, which would make it easier on them to be able to access the knowledge.
And if they needed that extended time, it could, you always have to find that built-in extended time in the classroom, but I think probably with the working together component, that kind of paces them through and gets them through that. But if it was like a writing thing and they needed extended time for the writing, maybe instead of recording all of the sins for each of the 10 Commandments, they could just write 1 or 2 of them, whereas everybody else is recording, all of the matches. Maybe they just do a couple of them, and that kind of builds in, lets them get to that individual writing component a little bit quicker than maybe some of the others.
And behaviorally, we have a student who is making sexually related comments or engages in inappropriate behavior with sexual overtones. Just as was commented before, if we know that this has kind of been going on, first and foremost, we're going to review our expectations prior. We're going to be very smart about who we put the person in the group with. So if it's a male that's making comments towards a female, well, it may be an all-male group. So that eliminates that aspect of it. Being close and being proximate to that group is very, very important. Your eyes and ears are open. Knowing the tendencies of kids, keeping them busy, making sure that they're engaged in the lesson so there's not idle time. And then, of course, if something happens, immediately acting upon that, because this is serious. So removing the child from the group, contacting the parents, contacting the administrators, because this crosses the line.
Thank you again, everyone, for viewing this video, and I'm hoping you can obtain some information from this today. I'm hoping you were able to see some examples on how to implement accommodations within certain stations or within a classroom or even within a certain level of instruction. I also hope you could take from this how to add Catholic identity within your stations and working together with your religion teacher on what the theme or what the concept of the week is. That way it'll help you create your instruction in your classroom. Again, if you have any other further questions, I'm happy to help any of our Catholic schools here in our Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston. You will see my direct line there, 713-391-2630, or you may email me at any time during the school year at bgonzales@arcgh.org. Thank you and have a blessed day.